I never thought I would have to say goodbye. Not like this, not forever. The day began like any other, with soft sunlight slipping through the curtains and the faint smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. But somewhere in the quiet, I knew something had changed, something I had been dreading for years. I sat beside her bed, holding her frail hand, feeling the tiny pulse that had always been steady and strong, now almost gone. Her eyes opened slowly, clouded with age, yet somehow still familiar. She looked at me, her lips moving, but the words didn't come easily. I leaned closer, straining to hear. "Don't be sad. I love you," she whispered. A lump formed in my throat. Love, that simple word held so much weight. Years of memories, of laughter, of guidance, of gentle scolding, of bedtime stories and whispered secrets, and now it hung in the air like a fragile thread, fragile but unbroken, connecting us even in the face of what I knew was coming. I smiled, though my heart felt heavy. "I love you too, Mom. I always have," I said. We sat there for a long time, quiet except for the slow ticking of the clock. I traced the lines on her hand with my thumb, the same hand that had once held mine when I was small, teaching me to walk, to read, to live. I remembered every lesson, every tear she had wiped away, every meal she had cooked, every hug that had made the world feel safe. And now, those hands were fragile, worn, a reminder of time's passage and the inevitability of goodbye. There was no room for anger, no time for regrets, only this moment, this fragile, precious moment before the final farewell. I could feel it pressing closer with each passing second, and I knew that soon I would have to let her go. But for now, I just stayed, just held her hand, just let her know that she was loved, that she had done everything a mother could, and that I would carry her in my heart forever. To understand that morning, I need to go back a little, back to the days when she was healthy, strong, and the center of my world. My mother was a quiet, gentle woman, with a presence that filled the room without making a sound. She had a way of noticing small details, the kind that others might overlook. She remembered birthdays of distant relatives, the favorite color of every neighbor's child, the small joys that made life feel full. And she gave, always gave, time, love, care, warmth. I grew up under her guidance. Our home smelled of freshly baked bread, sun-warmed curtains, and the garden she tended with such pride. Each day had a rhythm: morning tea together at the kitchen table, a brief walk to the corner store, evenings curled up with a book or a story. She was my comfort, my anchor, and even when I rebelled, even when I disagreed, her presence reminded me that love was constant. School mornings were chaotic sometimes. I remember rushing to put on my uniform, breakfast half-eaten, shoes missing, and she would patiently help, smoothing my hair, fixing my crooked tie, and giving me a soft smile that seemed to say, "I am here. You are safe." That smile stayed with me for years, even when she wasn't physically near. But life has a way of moving forward, often faster than we expect. Work, responsibilities, and eventually distance crept into our lives. I left for college, then for a job in another city. She stayed behind, tending to the home, keeping memories alive, waiting quietly for updates, phone calls, and visits that became less frequent over time. Through the years, I realized how much she had sacrificed for me. The sleepless nights, the worry, the times she put her own needs aside so that I could have opportunities she never had. I began to understand the depth of her love, the quiet, unassuming devotion that never sought recognition but gave everything. And then, illness crept in, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. She brushed off minor aches, insisted she was fine, never wanting to worry anyone. But we noticed. My siblings, I, and family friends saw the subtle changes: her slower pace, the fatigue in her eyes, the little coughs that lingered longer than they should. When the diagnosis came, it was not a sudden shock. We had been preparing, hoping, fearing, yet not fully ready. The doctors spoke in gentle tones, outlining treatments and prognosis, and I realized with a quiet ache that time was no longer something we could take for granted. I spent days reflecting, remembering the lessons she had taught me, how she had held me when I was afraid, how she had dried my tears and told me that life was a journey, and love made it worthwhile. Every memory, every small detail of her care, came rushing back as I held her hand during visits. Seeing how fragile she had become, visiting her became my anchor. I made time every day to sit by her side, to talk, to listen, to share stories, Even when words felt inadequate, I learned the value of silence, the comfort of presence, and the deep understanding that sometimes simply being there is more important than anything you can say. She would smile, even on hard days, and say, "Don't worry about me, I'm happy to see you." And I believed her, though my heart ached with the knowledge of what lay ahead. Those smiles were treasures, small victories against the inevitable, moments of light in a slowly dimming world. As her condition worsened, I began to prepare, not just emotionally, but practically. I organized her medications, coordinated visits with nurses, and made sure her favorite meals were on hand. Yet, despite all preparation, nothing could soften the blow of reality, the truth that soon I would have to say goodbye. And that brings me to the morning when everything felt suspended, the quiet before the farewell, the soft sunlight falling on the bed, the smell of coffee lingering in the air, the rhythmic ticking of the clock marking the moments we had left. Sitting there, holding her hand, I understood fully the depth of what it meant to love someone, not just when life is easy, not just when laughter fills the room, but in the quiet, tender, painful moments when you know that your presence is all the comfort you can give. Even though I was with her every day, things weren't easy. The reunion we had hoped for was not a storybook ending, not a sudden reconnection filled with laughter and tears that washed away 20 years of separation. Instead, it was fragile, quiet, and careful. There was hesitation in her eyes, a subtle barrier that seemed almost invisible, but was as real as the furniture around us. It wasn't made of anger, or resentment at least, not entirely, but of time, of years that had slipped past us, unspoken words, missed moments, and the shadow of fear. I watched her closely, studying the way she moved through the house, the small gestures that spoke volumes about what she felt. She looked smaller now, frail in some ways, but stubbornly proud, the same woman who had once guided me through life, now requiring me to be strong in ways I had never imagined. She resisted, quietly, to keep her independence, to maintain control over the small pieces of her world, and I understood, because I had always known that strength and pride were woven into who she was. Even when life challenged her. The mornings were the hardest. She would sit by the kitchen window, cradling her cup of tea, steam rising like morning mist, and stare at the garden, as if each flower held a story she had lived and lost. I would sit across from her, careful not to speak too quickly, trying to find the right rhythm for conversation. I started with light things: the weather, the birds outside, the roses I had planted just as she liked them. I hoped these small comforts would bridge the gap between us, but I quickly learned that comfort had a delicate rhythm. It couldn't be rushed or forced. She had her pace, and I had to respect it. Sometimes, when I reached out to hold her hand, she flinched, not out of anger, not entirely, but a subtle, instinctive hesitation that spoke of years of carrying fear alone, fear of dependence, fear of letting go, fear of being a burden. I felt it as clearly as if it had been a weight pressing down on my chest, and I carried my own weight alongside hers: guilt for not preventing the gradual decline in her health, helplessness in moments when I could do nothing, and sorrow for the times I had been absent. Even when I was physically there, every small interaction became a careful negotiation. I reminded her to take her medicine, and she shook her head, insisting she was fine. I suggested a meal, and she refused, worrying that she might inconvenience me. It seemed absurd sometimes, how such tiny acts could hold so much tension, but I learned that care in our lives is often wrapped in quiet battles. Every gesture, even the simplest, was a delicate dance, a test of trust and patience. One afternoon, I decided to try something different. I brought out an old photo album, hoping that familiar images might spark happy memories, soften her heart, or at least remind her of the love we had shared across the years. I opened the album slowly, letting the pages flutter like gentle whispers of the past. She took the first page with a careful hand, tracing the outline of my younger face, the small smiles frozen in time. She paused at each image, sometimes her eyes lighting up with recognition, sometimes narrowing as if recalling moments she hadn't wanted to remember. I watched her, my heart both aching and hoping. The photos held memories she carried alone, pieces of a life I had glimpsed only in fragments. I thought I saw regret in her expression, a shadow of sorrow for what could have been. The silence between us was thick, punctuated only by the soft turning of pages and the faint rustle of the wind outside. "Why didn't we do this sooner?" she asked softly, her voice trembling. She wasn't looking at me, her gaze fixed somewhere beyond the room, beyond the years, beyond the house itself. It was a question that hung in the air, fragile and heartbreaking, filled with unspoken longing. I swallowed hard, my throat tight with emotion. "We're here now," I said gently, keeping my voice calm, careful not to overwhelm her. "That's what matters. We're together, and we can take it from here." But her silence lingered, unbroken, and in that quiet, I realized something profound. Despite all the years we had spent together now, despite the closeness we were beginning to rebuild, there were corners of her heart and mind I could not reach, not yet. Perhaps not ever. Memories, regrets, fears, and experiences that were hers alone, untouched by my presence. And in that moment, I understood that love was not about fixing everything. It was not about erasing the past or solving problems. Love, at its deepest, simplest, and most honest, is about being present. It is about sitting beside someone as they navigate the shadows of their own heart, holding space for pain without judgment, and offering your hand, even when they may not immediately take it. It is about patience, the kind of patience that sees the small victories, the tiniest hints of a smile, the softening of a gaze, the tentative reach across a table for a cup of tea. I began to notice these small victories in the days that followed. She would linger longer at the table in the mornings, sipping her tea while making small comments about the flowers or the news. Sometimes she would glance at me with something close to a smile, a quiet acknowledgement that she was beginning to trust the rhythm we were creating together. And I realized that these moments, though tiny, were enormous in the scope of what we were trying to rebuild. There were, of course, setbacks, days when she would retreat into silence, withdrawing from conversation entirely, leaving me to sit beside her and wait. On these days, I would bring her a blanket, make her tea, or simply hold her hand without speaking. Sometimes she would respond with a gentle squeeze, sometimes not at all. But each act of presence was a thread, stitching slowly, delicately, across the years of separation. Even ordinary activities, preparing a meal together, watering the plants, reading the newspaper, became tests of patience and understanding. A dropped spoon or a forgotten name could trigger a quiet frustration, not loud or angry, but palpable. And I learned to breathe through it, to let her express her emotions, to let the imperfect moments exist without trying to correct them instantly. One evening, as we shared a simple dinner, I watched her pause staring at the wall as if seeing something beyond it. I asked gently, "Are you thinking about something, Mom?" She looked at me, eyes glossy, voice soft. "I'm thinking about all the years I spent worrying, all the things I never said." I nodded, my heart heavy. "You don't have to say them all at once. We have time now, and we can take it slowly." That night, I reflected on the fragility of the reunion. We were not yet whole. The bridge across the 20-year gap was under construction, plank by plank, moment by moment. And yet, in the smallest gestures, tea shared on the porch, hands held in quiet solidarity, soft laughter over a memory, the bridge was being built. I also began to understand the depth of her fears, fear of losing autonomy, fear of vulnerability, fear that even after decades of love, she might still be left alone. And I understood my own fears, that I might not be able to mend what had been broken. That time had shaped her in ways I could not undo, that I might fail in offering her the comfort she so desperately needed. But slowly, ever so slowly, trust began to seep in. She allowed herself to lean on me for small things. She let me help with a sweater, or guide her to the garden. She spoke softly about old memories, tentative at first, then with more openness. And each day, the small barriers that had seemed insurmountable began to show cracks, letting light in. I learned that reconciliation is not a dramatic moment. It is the accumulation of countless small interactions. Each smile, each shared cup of tea, each gentle touch is a building block. It is the recognition that love does not demand perfection, that it thrives in patience, presence, and the courage to be gentle with each other's wounds. And, in those moments, I realized something that had been true all along. Even after years of distance, even after silence and absence, love endures. It may be quiet, it may be fragile, but it waits for us to recognize it, to nurture it, and to allow it to grow again, slowly, moment by moment. As the days passed, her moods became a mirror of the struggle inside her. Sometimes she was playful, laughing at a memory we shared, teasing me about my stubborn habits. Other times, she withdrew, staring out the window with distant eyes, lost in thoughts I could not reach. I tried to stay patient, but the tug of war between hope and fear weighed heavily on both of us. I wanted to cheer her up, to remind her of all the love around her, Yet, I knew that pressing too hard would only push her further away. And so I learned the quiet art of sitting beside her, letting silence speak when words were too much. Meals became a battleground of emotions. She would refuse certain dishes, saying she wasn't hungry, and I would gently encourage her, trying to nourish her not just physically but emotionally. Every bite refused felt like a reminder of her fragility. Every sip of tea refused felt like a warning that our time was limited. But one evening, as the rain fell softly outside, she asked me a question that pierced my heart. "Do you think I'll be okay?" I hesitated. "You're strong," I whispered. "You've always been strong. And you're not alone. I'm right here." She nodded, but the tension in her shoulders didn't ease. I realized that my words, though meant to comfort, could not erase the fears she carried. And in that realization, I learned that love sometimes has to sit with fear. Sometimes has to endure the ache of knowing you cannot fix everything. There were small misunderstandings too. I might remind her to rest, and she would interpret it as criticism. I tried to balance caring with respecting her independence, but it was a delicate line to walk. Every gentle correction, every word of advice, had the potential to spark frustration or tears. And yet, even in those difficult moments, I saw glimpses of her old self, the stubborn, lively woman who had taught me so much about life, who still carried sparks of humor, wisdom, and warmth despite her illness. At night, I would sit in the quiet of her room after she had fallen asleep, reflecting on the day. I realized that rising conflict wasn't about anger or shouting. It was the subtle tug-of-war between love and fear, between independence and care, between the past and the present. And I understood that every small moment, every gentle touch, every shared silence was slowly bridging the gap. Even if it didn't feel like progress in the moment, by the end of the second week, I knew the journey was only beginning. Love alone could not heal all fears. Patience alone could not erase decades of anxiety. But together, in those fragile, tender days, we were beginning the slow work of reconciling heart and mind, of finding peace in presence, and of learning how to face the inevitable goodbye without losing the moments we still had. As the days grew shorter and the sunlight filtered softly through the curtains, I began noticing details I had tried not to see before. Small things, almost imperceptible at first. The way she paused longer than usual at the edge of a step, the slight hesitation when she lifted a cup of tea to her lips, the faint creak in her joints when she turned to reach for a book. These were subtle signs, gentle reminders that time had been quietly, inevitably moving forward, leaving me acutely aware of the fragility of our remaining moments together. I had spent years preparing myself mentally for her absence, for the idea that one day I would have to say goodbye. But preparation doesn't soften the ache. It doesn't cushion the sharp, twisting ache that accompanies each realization that a loved one is mortal, that the hands you hold today may tremble tomorrow in ways that cannot be fixed. And so, each morning I watched her, half wishing to ignore the signs, half wishing to memorize every movement, every expression, so that I could hold her forever in my memory. One afternoon, she called me to sit beside her in the living room. Her hands, usually composed and steady, gripped mine tightly, almost desperately. The warmth of her touch belied the vulnerability in her eyes, eyes that seemed to search mine for understanding, for reassurance, for a shared acknowledgement of the truth we both were feeling but could scarcely voice. "I don't know how much longer I'll be here," she whispered. Her voice was soft, but each word struck me as though it were a hammer to my chest. I swallowed the lump in my throat, fought back the tears that threatened to spill, and took her hand in both of mine. "We have today," I said, striving for calm, for steadiness. "That's all that matters." Her gaze drifted across the room, settling finally on a framed photograph of us taken decades ago. It was a simple picture, the two of us in the garden, sunlight on our faces, laughter caught mid. She traced the edges of the frame gently, as though touching the past itself might bridge the years between us. "I wish I could go back," she said softly. "I wish I could spend more time with you, do things differently." I shook my head gently, wanting to ease her heart, though my own was heavy with the same regret. "You've done nothing wrong," I said. "Life brought us here. We are together now, and that is what matters." Even as I spoke, I felt the weight of unspoken truths pressing against us. Every conversation, every shared laugh, every quiet evening together was now tinged with a subtle urgency. Time, which we had once assumed would stretch endlessly before us, now felt like grains of sand slipping rapidly through our fingers. Each moment held the sharp tension of impermanence, the quiet insistence that we could not waste a single heartbeat. I began noticing other signs, to the tiny hesitations when she reached for her favorite book, the small sighs of fatigue after walking to the kitchen, the way she sometimes stared out the window, as if she were contemplating memories long gone. I realized that the turning point of our journey wasn't a single dramatic event, but a gradual, growing awareness. It was the fragile, quiet understanding that the days we had left together were finite, precious beyond measure, and slipping away more quickly than we could grasp. I found myself watching her more closely than ever, the way she laughed at a familiar memory, the way her hand would brush mine in passing, the way she held her cup of tea with deliberate carol. These small, ordinary gestures became extraordinary in the context of what we now knew, that these days, these simple, mundane moments, were treasures. Some mornings, I would wake early, quietly preparing breakfast, making sure everything was just as she liked it. I watched the sunlight touch her hair as she sat by the table, a gentle smile on her lips, and felt a sharp, almost unbearable love. The kind that makes your chest ache and your throat tighten. I wanted to stop time, to stretch these moments into eternity, but I knew I could not. All I could do was hold her hand, whisper softly, and let her know, through every gesture, that she was deeply cherished. There were conversations, too, that arose from this fragile awareness. Sometimes she would speak of the past, of regrets, of mistakes she had made or paths she had chosen without me. Sometimes she would speak of her own fears, the fear of leaving too soon, the fear of being forgotten, the fear that our renewed closeness would not have enough time to grow. And in those moments, I would listen, quietly, letting her words flow without interruption, without judgment. I offered only empathy, presence, and love. One evening, as the sun dipped low behind the trees, painting the room in shades of gold and rose, she reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly. "I've spent so long worrying about leaving, about what you would do without me," she whispered. "I don't want you to be lonely when I'm gone." I squeezed her hand gently, trying to convey more than words ever could. "I will carry you in my heart, always," I said softly. "You've been my guide, my strength, my love. Even if you go before me, you will never leave me, because you are a part of me." The days that followed were filled with small, poignant moments, sitting together on the porch as rain tapped softly against the windows, cooking meals, side by side, in silence, broken only by the occasional comment, walking slowly through the garden as she reminisced about flowers she had planted and cared for decades ago. Each activity, no matter how mundane, carried the weight of urgency, the knowledge that we could not afford to waste a single second. I noticed that she began to reflect more openly on the choices of her past, the times she had felt afraid, alone, or uncertain. She would speak softly of regrets, of dreams she hadn't pursued, of words she had never said, and I would listen, absorbing each confession, each memory, as though they were precious fragments of her soul being entrusted to me. I never tried to correct her, never tried to soothe too quickly. I realized that these revelations were her own path to closure, her way of preparing herself for the inevitable. While reconnecting with me, the turning point became clearer with every quiet moment. It wasn't a dramatic scene, not a sudden loss, not a hospital room or a sharp diagnosis. It was the accumulation of small realizations, the tremor in her hands, the quiet hesitations, the whispered confessions of mortality. I could feel it in the way she lingered just a little longer when we held hands, in the soft tears she shed when recalling the past, in the moments she smiled with gratitude for the time we now shared. And I realized something profound. The awareness of mortality did not diminish our love, it intensified it. It made each conversation sharper, each gesture more meaningful. It allowed us to speak the things we had held back, to laugh freely, to cry together, to simply exist in the presence of each other without fear of wasted time. I began to memorize the small things about her: the way her hair fell across her forehead, the way her lips curved when she smiled, the subtle rhythms of her breathing when she was at peace. I photographed her presence in my mind, creating mental keepsakes of ordinary moments that had suddenly become extraordinary. Sometimes I caught her watching me, eyes soft, voice trembling with emotion. "I'm glad you're here," she whispered, and I felt my chest tighten. "I'm glad you never gave up on me." Those words, simple as they were, carried a lifetime of unspoken feelings, and I understood, with a quiet ache, that we were both learning to live in this fragile, fleeting time together, fully present, fully aware of the preciousness of each day. I realized that the turning point of our journey was this very awareness, the fragile understanding that every shared moment mattered, that every smile, every touch, every quiet presence was a gift. The goodbye I had always feared was no longer a distant thought. It was an underlying truth that gave urgency and depth to everything we did, and in that knowledge, a new bond formed, stronger not because it was perfect, but because it was conscious, deliberate, and rooted in love and awareness. We began to speak more openly of our fears, our regrets, our wishes. We held each other through tears, laughed at small joys, and reflected quietly on what it meant to be together again, in the face of life's inevitability. I began to understand that the beauty of these last days, or perhaps months, or however long they would last, was not in avoiding loss, but in embracing presence. And so, each morning, I watched her wake, and each night, I held her hand as she slept, savoring the rhythm of her breathing, the warmth of her skin, the life that still pulsed within her. I knew that every word I spoke, every story I shared, every moment I lingered beside her, would one day become a cherished memory. The fragile realization that life was limited had opened a new chapter in our relationship, one defined not by regret, but by the quiet, urgent beauty of shared time. We learned together to savor the simple acts, a cup of tea, a whispered story, a brush of the hand, a shared glance. The ordinary became sacred, each second a reminder of what truly mattered: love, presence, connection, and the courage to face the inevitability of goodbye while holding tightly to the moments we still had. It was not easy. Some days, fear would creep in, a shadow lurking in the corners of our hearts. I feared that time would steal her from me before we could speak all the words we needed to, before we could reconcile fully, before we could simply exist together in peace. And she feared leaving me behind, just as I feared losing her. But in those shared fears, in those quiet acknowledgments of mortality, we found a deeper intimacy, a tenderness that had been waiting for decades to surface. And in the fragile realization that time was fleeting, I understood the true essence of love, that it is not measured by the length of years, but by the depth of presence, by the awareness that each shared moment is irreplaceable, that each day we have together is a gift, precious beyond measure, a chance to say, through words and gestures, I love you, I am here, you matter. One rainy evening, she called me into her bedroom. The sound of raindrops tapping against the window filled the silence. She sat on the edge of her bed, hands folded in her lap. I want to tell you something, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I sat beside her, holding her hand. Anything, Mom, I said softly. She took a deep breath, her eyes glistening. I'm scared that I won't have the strength to say goodbye properly, that I'll leave things unsaid. I don't want to leave you with regret. Tears filled my eyes. You've never left me with regret. You've given me a lifetime of love. Just being here now, with you, is enough. We talked then, for hours, about memories both happy and painful. She told me stories from her childhood, from times I had never known. I shared my own recollections, the small moments that had shaped our bond. Every laugh, every tear, every soft sigh seemed to stitch our hearts closer together. But as the night wore on, I felt the weight of reality pressing down. The goodbye I had feared wasn't something that could be avoided. It was approaching, and I had to prepare myself for it. And yet, even in the face of that knowledge, I found a quiet gratitude, grateful for the chance to speak, to listen, to be near her before the inevitable came. The morning arrived with a softness I had not expected. The sun rose slowly, casting pale gold light across the kitchen table where she sat, hands wrapped gently around her teacup. There was a quiet clarity in her eyes that I hadn't seen before, a gentle acceptance, a calm readiness that both comforted me and made my heart ache. The usual morning sounds, the kettle's whistle, the distant chirping of birds, the rustling of leaves, seemed almost hushed, as though the world itself was giving us this moment, aware that it was fleeting, precious, and sacred. We sat together in silence, sipping our tea. There was no rush, no need for conversation. Words felt unnecessary. Our presence alone carried the weight of decades, the unspoken confessions, the missed years, and the reunion we had finally achieved. Every breath she took, every small movement, became monumental in my mind. The world had reduced itself to this quiet kitchen, this simple morning, and I wanted to imprint every detail on my memory so that it would never leave me. At one point, she reached across the table, her fingers brushing against mine, and gave my hand a gentle squeeze. Her touch was firm yet tender, a gesture of love, trust, and farewell all in one. I'm ready, she said softly. Her words, though simple, struck me with an intensity I could scarcely describe. My chest tightened, my throat constricted, and my hands trembled ever so slightly as I tried to maintain composure. "Ready for what?" I asked, my voice barely audible, fragile in its attempt to stay steady. "To let go," she whispered, eyes shimmering with emotion. "I'm ready to say goodbye, and I want you to remember me with love, not sadness." I swallowed hard, tears pricking the corners of my eyes, but I nodded. I understood. Deep within, I had always feared this moment, had imagined it countless times in lonely nights, yet when it arrived, it was quieter, more intimate, more profound than I could have anticipated. There were no dramatic declarations, no last-minute regrets, no grand farewells shouted across rooms or corridors. There was simply the gentle, undeniable truth of our mortality. Acknowledged and accepted, together we spent that day side by side, as though it were any other, yet every action was laced with unspoken significance. We cooked a simple meal, moving together with the quiet rhythm of familiarity. The scent of bread and herbs filled the air, mingling with memories of all the meals we had shared over the years, the hurried breakfasts of my youth, the afternoons, when I had tried and failed to teach her to cook, the evenings spent laughing over burnt toast or spilled milk. Even in this quiet finality, there was laughter, soft and sincere, that reminded me that joy could exist alongside sorrow, and that love could be fully expressed even in the face of farewell. We talked sparingly, choosing words carefully, each sentence a gentle brushstroke on the canvas of memory we were painting together. She spoke of childhood moments I had long cherished in my heart, but never voiced aloud, the little victories, the small triumphs, the simple joys that had once filled our home. I listened intently, responding only with smiles, nods, or quiet affirmations. Some memories brought laughter, others brought tears. I held them all within me, knowing that this day, this closeness, would be etched in my soul forever. As the afternoon light shifted, she rested her head on my shoulder. The warmth of her presence was almost tangible, a quiet reassurance that even in the face of parting, we were connected beyond the limits of time and space. I felt the gentle rise and fall of her breath against me, and it was as though the world had contracted to the simple rhythm of that motion, the shared heartbeat of two lives intertwined at one point. She spoke in a whisper, as if reluctant to disturb the delicate balance of the moment. "I am not afraid any more," she said. "I have lived, I have loved, I have been loved, and I have you. That has been more than enough." Her words, full of grace and quiet courage, pierced through the wall of my emotions. I felt a mixture of awe, sorrow, and gratitude. Sorrow for the inevitability of parting, gratitude for the chance to share this last day, and awe at the strength she displayed even in vulnerability. She had always been my guiding light, and now, even in the face of farewell, she shone brightly, unwavering and tender. We walked slowly together through the garden, the familiar paths lined with the blooms she had nurtured over the years. Every flower seemed to speak in silence, the roses, the lilies, the small wildflowers that had sprouted unexpectedly. Each petal, each leaf, became a reminder of the life she had lived, the care she had given, the love she had sown in every corner of our world. I held her hand firmly as we moved, feeling both the warmth of her skin and the fragility beneath it. The shadows lengthened as the sun began its descent. We returned indoors, settling into the living room with the soft glow of the late afternoon streaming through the curtains. I noticed the subtle changes in her breathing, the small pauses that punctuated each inhale, the faint quiver of her lips when she smiled. Every detail became magnified, a poignant reminder of the impermanence of life and the beauty contained within it. We shared memories in silence, the kind that do not require words. I watched her eyes, traced the lines of her face, memorized the gentle curve of her smile, the way her hair fell across her forehead. Each glance carried the weight of years, of separation, of reunion, and now, of farewell. The room was filled with a quiet intimacy, the kind that can only exist when two people are fully present with each other, fully aware of the fleeting nature of the moment. As night fell, she held my hand one last time, her fingers warm and trembling. The dim light of the lamp cast soft shadows across the room, highlighting the contours of her face, the softness in her eyes, the quiet grace in her posture. I felt a surge of emotion, a complex mix of love, sorrow, fear, and acceptance. "Thank you for being my daughter," I whispered, my voice trembling. I could feel the lump in my throat, the tears threatening to spill, but I fought to keep them in check, wanting to honor her strength, her grace, her wishes. She smiled faintly, a serene, knowing smile that held decades of wisdom, love, and quiet courage. "And thank you for being my mother." "I love you," she replied softly, her voice filled with the kind of warmth that reaches deep into the heart and lingers there forever. I stayed by her side that night, sitting quietly, holding her hand, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she slept. The room was silent except for the faint ticking of the clock and the occasional rustle of leaves outside. I knew in my heart that the goodbye I had feared was near, and yet there was no rush, no panic. There was only the profound understanding that we had shared something extraordinary, a love that endured, patient and steadfast, across years of absence, misunderstanding, and longing. I thought of all the mornings, the afternoons, the evenings we had spent together, the laughter, the tears, the quiet moments that had now become so incredibly precious. I realized that love, true love, does not vanish in absence or in time. It remains, quietly waiting for the right moment to be expressed, to be recognized, to be cherished. The nights stretched on, and I whispered stories to her as she drifted between sleep and wakefulness. I spoke of memories long held in my heart, of the small, ordinary moments that had shaped our lives, of the love that had never wavered. She listened, sometimes murmuring softly, sometimes closing her eyes with a peaceful sigh. Each sound, each gesture, each subtle movement became a testament to a bond that could not be broken, even by the inevitability of farewell. In the hours that followed, I understood something I had always known but never fully grasped, that parting does not diminish love. Love exists beyond presence, beyond time, beyond the constraints of the physical world. It resides in memory, in the echo of shared moments, in the quiet understanding that the heart carries with it forever. And in that understanding, I found a fragile peace. I knew that the morning we had shared, the quiet companionship, the laughter and tears, the gentle touches and whispered words, all of it was enough. It was enough to bridge the years of separation, enough to honor the life she had lived, enough to remind me that the essence of our bond would remain even after she was gone. As I sat by her side, holding her hand, I felt the weight of time, of love, and of loss. I felt the beauty of the ordinary morning, the ordinary meal, the ordinary presence of someone who had meant everything to me. And I knew, with certainty, that even when the goodbye arrived in its final form, the love we had nurtured, shared, and expressed would remain eternal, undiminished, and radiant in its quiet strength. The following morning felt impossibly quiet. The house, filled for decades with the soft rhythms of her presence, now carried a stillness that pressed against my chest. I stayed by her side, holding her hand, tracing the lines I had known all my life. Each breath she took felt fragile, like a candle flickering in a gentle breeze. I whispered softly, "I love you, Mom, always." Her fingers tightened ever so slightly around mine, and I felt her acknowledging the words, even in silence. It was a comfort, but also a reminder that the end was near. I remembered all the times she had cared for me, guided me, and held me through storms. The small acts of love, once unnoticed, now shone like stars in the darkness. Every meal she had prepared, every encouraging word, every quiet smile, these were the moments that built a lifetime of connection. I realized that love is measured not only in words, but in these small, persistent acts that linger long after the person is gone. We spoke quietly about memories, the stories that had shaped us. Laughter emerged between tears as we recalled funny incidents from my childhood. Her gentle reprimands, the way she tucked me into bed with stories and kisses, the past 20 years of distance, the unspoken regrets, seemed to soften in that gentle sharing. I could feel the bond we had cultivated over decades, now shining with clarity even in the shadow of goodbye. As the sun filtered through the window, painting the room in soft gold, I held her close. I felt the warmth of her love one last time, and promised myself that I would carry it forward. This was the first part of healing, not in the absence of pain, but in the embrace of all the love she had given me, letting it fill the space her departure would leave. The hours that followed unfolded with a gentle, deliberate pace, each moment filled with a quiet intimacy that words could hardly capture. I helped her settle into her favorite chair by the window, the one that caught the morning sun just right, and allowed her to watch the garden she had tended for so many years. I fluffed the pillows behind her, arranging them in just the way she liked, until she nodded and smiled softly. a gesture both simple and profound. There was an air of serenity about her that I had never seen before, a calm readiness, a quiet dignity in the knowledge that the end was approaching. Outside, the rain began to fall, a steady, rhythmic tapping against the glass. It was gentle, almost musical, a soft percussion that seemed to mark the passage of time, echoing the silent rhythm of our hearts. The sound was comforting. A quiet companion in a room that had become sacred through the presence of shared love and anticipation. I watched the droplets slide down the pane, reflecting the muted light of the day, each one like a tiny memory falling slowly, settling where it belonged. She turned to me then, eyes soft, yet clear and resolute. "Promise me you'll be okay," she whispered, her voice barely above the murmur of rain. "Promise me you'll remember me with warmth, not with sorrow." I felt a lump rise in my throat. My hands shook slightly as I reached for hers, holding them firmly, feeling the familiar warmth and the frailty beneath. "I promise, Mom," I whispered back, my voice thick with emotion. "I will never forget you. Your love will stay with me forever." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears, and for a moment we simply held each other's hands, neither speaking, letting the silence carry the depth of our bond. It was a silence that held more meaning than any words could convey. In it was a lifetime of shared joys, small victories, moments of laughter and sorrow, and decades of love unbroken by distance, absence, or time. I realized then that acceptance wasn't about forcing the heart to stop hurting. It was about allowing love to exist fully. Even as the body began to fade, we began to speak quietly about the future. Though not of hers, she no longer focused on what she would miss, what she would leave behind, but of mine, the life I would continue to live after she was gone. She wanted me to understand that her love did not end with her passing. It would linger in the way I moved through the world, in the way I treated others, in the quiet lessons of kindness, patience, and compassion that she had imparted throughout my life. "Live fully," she said, her voice gentle yet firm. "Do not carry grief in a way that shadows your days. Remember me. Yes, but remember me with love, not with sorrow. My joy is in your life, your laughter, your moments of happiness." I nodded, tears slipping freely now, and held her hand closer. "I will," I said, my voice trembling. "I will carry you with me, in every small thing, every gentle moment, every laugh, every sunrise." The rain fell steadily outside, casting a soft gray light over the room. The world beyond the window seemed distant, muted, as though time had slowed to match the deliberate pacing of our farewell. I remembered words she had spoken to me when I was a child, simple yet profound truths I had often dismissed in the rush of life. "Life is precious, even in the smallest moments," she had said. Now I understood fully. Every laugh, every shared glance, every touch, every word, these were treasures. The act of saying goodbye did not erase love. It transformed it, made it more delicate, more enduring, and infinitely more precious. We spent the day together in small rituals, each one a quiet celebration of the life we had shared and the love that would continue beyond her presence. We looked through old photographs, some faded and worn at the edges, others crisp and vibrant. Each picture told a story: family gatherings, birthdays, vacations, quiet afternoons at home. She would point at a figure and tell a story, sometimes laughing, sometimes pausing thoughtfully. "Do you remember this day?" she asked, pointing at a photo of us in the park, a picnic blanket spread under a towering oak. "You were chasing the butterflies, and I kept telling you to slow down. You never listened." I smiled, a tear slipping down my cheek. "I remember," I said softly, "and you kept laughing at me, pretending to scold me, but I knew you loved it." "Yes," she murmured, her eyes misting. "Even then, life was made up of small moments like these. Never forget that, my dear. It's the little things that matter the most." As the hours passed, we shared memories of people long gone, friends and family whose presence had shaped our lives, moments of kindness and heartbreak, lessons learned and wisdom imparted. Every story became a bridge connecting the life I had lived with her to the life I would now live without her. Each narrative, each recollection, was a thread in the fabric of our enduring bond, a reminder that love does not vanish but only changes form. She paused often, catching her breath, resting her head on my shoulder, letting me adjust her pillows, smooth her hair back gently. I felt the weight of these moments, the gravity of them, the silent acknowledgement of mortality that hung softly in the air. And yet, there was no fear, no despair, only love, acceptance, and a quiet courage that I had always admired in her. At one point, She turned to me with a small smile, and I noticed a light in her eyes, a peace I had not seen before. Do not cry for me, she said softly. Your tears are love, yes, but I want you to carry joy as well. Celebrate our time together. Remember the laughter, the warmth, the quiet afternoons. That is the gift I leave with you. I nodded again, pressing my forehead gently against hers. I will, I whispered, my tears falling freely now. Every day, I will remember you. In the sunlight, in the laughter of others, in quiet moments like this, you will always be with me. Evening came, and the rain continued. Now a gentle drizzle. The soft light from the lamp cast shadows across the room, illuminating her face with a tender glow. She rested her head against the arm of the chair, eyes closing briefly, breathing slow and steady. I held her hand in mine, feeling the warmth, the slight tremor, and the familiarity of every line, every contour, every small imperfection that I had memorized over a lifetime. We did not rush, we did not speak unnecessarily. Instead, we simply existed together, fully present in the moment. I reminded myself that this was a gift the last day, a final series of moments where our love could be expressed fully, without distraction, without pretense. I soaked in every sound, every touch, every glance, knowing that these details would remain with me forever. As the night deepened, she murmured softly, I am ready. I am not afraid. I have lived a full life, and I am grateful for every moment. Thank you for walking this path with me. I squeezed her hand tightly, tears streaming down my face. Thank you for being my mother, I said. Thank you for your love, your guidance, your presence. I will carry you with me, always. We sat together for hours in quiet companionship, holding hands, watching the rain, listening to the soft hum of the house settling around us. Every small gesture, adjusting a blanket, brushing a strand of hair from her face, offering water or tea was an act of love, of connection, of reverence for the time we had left. I understood then that acceptance was not about denying grief but allowing love to exist beyond the physical presence, letting it continue in memory, in action, in the rhythm of daily life. Even in those final hours, she showed me strength, grace, and love. She did not dwell on what was ending, on the moments she would miss, or the goodbyes that would sting. Instead, she focused on what remained: the love we shared, the memories we had created, the quiet affirmation that even after parting, our connection would endure. I realized that acceptance is a process, not a single moment. It grows gradually, softly, like sunlight touching frost in the morning, melting it gently until the day begins anew. It comes in the shared silence, in the laughter over an old joke, in the quiet storytelling of days long gone, in the reassurance that love is permanent, even when life is fleeting. By the end of that day, I felt a fragile peace settle over both of us. We had spoken of the inevitable, acknowledged the reality of parting, and yet we had filled our time together with tenderness, laughter, and love. We had said goodbye not with drama or fear, but with acceptance, grace, and dignity. That night, I held her hand as she slept, letting the soft rhythm of her breathing guide my thoughts. I whispered softly, recounting stories of our shared life, words of love and gratitude, knowing that even if the goodbye came soon, our bond would remain intact, enduring, and unwavering. And in that quiet night, with rain tapping against the windows, I understood fully the love we shared, patient and steadfast, would survive beyond her presence. It would live in memory, in the warmth of my heart, in the actions I carried forward, in the lessons she had instilled, and in the quiet moments that would continue to shape my life. Acceptance, I realized, is not surrender, it is embracing the enduring power of love, even as the world changes around us. The night after she left was heavy and still. The house seemed both larger and emptier at the same time. Every familiar sound and shadow suddenly different, quieter, charged with a presence that could not be seen but only felt. I sat in her favorite chair, the one by the window where she had spent countless mornings with her tea, the sunlight filtering softly across the room. I held her hand in mine, though it was cold now, a tangible reminder that she was no longer physically here, and yet I could almost feel her warmth lingering in the air, like a subtle perfume or a faint echo of a laugh. I whispered her name softly, barely audible, letting the words float into the silence. I love you, Mom. I spoke slowly, deliberately, as if saying it aloud would somehow weave her essence back into the world around me. My voice trembled, but I did not rush. I lingered in the sound of her name, letting it roll over my tongue, trying to commit every syllable, every pause, every memory to my heart. I recalled that final moment, the clarity in her eyes, the softness of her voice when she said, "I love you." I held on to that gaze, that expression, every detail, seared into my memory. It was a gift, a final offering of love that seemed to transcend all time and space, carrying with it a lifetime of connection, understanding, and the unconditional bond between mother and child. I repeated her words in my mind over and over, letting them sink into me, letting them become part of the rhythm of my own heartbeat. In the hours that followed, the quiet was almost tangible. I walked slowly through the house, touching the objects she had loved, feeling the familiar textures of fabrics, the cool smoothness of her favorite teacup, the worn edges of the books she had read countless times. Each item became a connection, a thread linking me to her even though she was gone. I lingered in her room, smelling the faint traces of her perfume, the scent of flowers she had arranged, the faint trace of her presence in the linens. These were small things, perhaps insignificant to anyone else, but to me, they were everything. They were the remnants of a life lived fully, lovingly, and they carried the weight of her existence. I began to see her routines everywhere. In the way the sunlight hit the kitchen counter in the mornings, reminding me of how she would place her cup just so before taking a sip. I remembered how she had hummed softly while arranging her garden, how she had spoken in quiet tones while reading, how she had laughed at small, almost imperceptible jokes. Every memory was vivid and detailed, a tapestry woven from years of shared life, each thread a reminder that though her body was gone, her presence was eternal. At first, the grief felt overwhelming, almost unmanageable. I would find myself standing in her room, suddenly aware of the silence where there had once been warmth. Tears would come without warning, sometimes quietly, sometimes in waves that left me shaking. But slowly, I began to recognize a subtle shift. The grief did not diminish. It transformed. It became a reminder of love, of connection, of a lifetime that had been shared. It became a motivation to honor her memory in every action, to carry forward the lessons she had imparted, and to let her love guide me in ways I could never have imagined. I started small. I would make her favorite tea, just as she had taught me. Watching the steam curl from the cup and remembering the gentle way she had held hers, I spoke to her silently as I worked, narrating my day, sharing small thoughts, expressing gratitude for all she had given me. It felt as if she were still listening, her presence tucked quietly into the folds of my daily life. And slowly, the act of speaking to her, of keeping her memory alive in these simple routines, brought a gentle comfort, a sense of closeness that transcended physical absence. I spent time in the garden she had loved so dearly. The flowers were in bloom, as though she had arranged them herself before she left. I tended the plants carefully, remembering the way she had taught me to prune, to water, to nurture. As I worked, I whispered stories to her, as if she were beside me, her guidance present in every decision. I felt her joy in the sunlight, her delight in the small victories, the first bloom, the way the bees hummed among the petals. Each moment in the garden became a dialogue with her spirit, a way to keep her alive in the world she had cherished. Carrying her forward meant embracing her lessons, her habits, and her wisdom. It meant taking the compassion she had shown, the patience she had exemplified, and the love she had given unconditionally, and allowing it to shape the way I lived. I noticed the small ways her influence permeated my actions, how I spoke to my own children, how I treated friends and neighbors, how I faced challenges with quiet resilience. Each act, no matter how minor, became a tribute, a continuation of her essence in the world. I began writing letters to her, not to send, but to preserve the dialogue we had shared. I wrote about my day, about my thoughts, my fears, my triumphs. I wrote about moments that reminded me of her, moments that I wanted to share, even though she was no longer there to hear them. The process became a form of meditation, a way to process grief, to honor her memory, and to keep the thread of connection alive. Each letter was a conversation, each word a testament to the enduring bond between us. Visiting family and friends became a way to share her presence. I spoke of her often, recounting stories, sharing her wisdom, recounting the humor, the love, and the quiet strength she had carried through life. In doing so, I realized that memory is not just personal, it is communal. Her life, her essence, could continue to influence, to comfort, and to inspire others through the way I shared it. I saw smiles, tears, and nods of understanding from those who had known her, and I realized that love can ripple outward, touching lives far beyond the immediate circle. There were moments, of course, when sorrow returned with sharp clarity. A photograph, a song, a scent could bring the ache back as if she had never left. And yet, I learned to welcome these moments, to let them remind me that love does not fade, but transforms. The pain was part of the gift. It proved that what we had shared was real, that it had mattered, that it had left an indelible mark on my heart. In time, I began to integrate her lessons fully into my daily life. I cooked the meals she had once taught me, preparing them with care and intention, thinking of her as I measured, stirred, and seasoned. I taught my children the small, quiet rituals she had passed down: how to fold napkins, how to serve tea with grace, how to treat each task as an opportunity for love. In these moments, she lived on, not just in memory, but in action, shaping the hearts and lives of those around me. I also found solace in reflection. Each evening, I would sit quietly, often by the window she had loved, watching the rain or the sunset, recounting the events of the day, speaking to her as if she were beside me. I shared my triumphs, my mistakes, my small victories, my failures, and the lessons I had learned along the way. In doing so, I felt a sense of continuity, a reassurance that life, though changed, could still carry the essence of what she had given me. As months passed, the ache of absence softened. It never fully disappeared, nor would I want it to, for it was a testament to the depth of love shared. What grew in its place was a quiet, enduring peace, a sense of carrying her forward not just in memory, but in action, in kindness, in the small, deliberate choices that defined daily life. I found myself living more fully, appreciating the present, nurturing relationships, and approaching life with a tenderness and awareness that I had only truly understood through loss. I realized that carrying her forward meant more than remembering it, meant embodying her. Her patience became my patience, her kindness my guiding principle, her laughter my reminder to find joy in small moments. And every time I acted with these qualities, I felt her near, her presence unmistakable, alive in a way that was both gentle and profound. In the quiet of the house, I would sometimes pause, close my eyes, and imagine her beside me. I would picture her smile, her voice, her gentle gestures, and in those moments, grief and joy intertwined, a delicate balance of sorrow for the loss and gratitude for the gift. It was in this balance that I found strength, a renewed purpose, and the courage to embrace life fully. Carrying her essence into every corner of my days, I came to understand, deeply, that love is not confined to presence. It exists beyond sight, beyond touch, beyond the boundaries of mortality. The lessons she taught me, the love she gave, the laughter we shared, they were not lost. They had transformed into a living force, one that would continue to shape my life, my children's lives, and the lives of those I touched. Saying goodbye had been inevitable, but love had endured, transforming into a guiding light that would never fade. And so, in carrying her forward, I found solace, courage, and hope. I walked through the garden she had loved, tending the flowers, feeling the warmth of the sun, listening to the birds she had delighted in. I cooked meals with care, spoke with tenderness, and approached life with a renewed appreciation for every fleeting moment. She was gone from sight, yes, but never from my heart. Her love, patience, and wisdom lived on in every action, every decision, every quiet, deliberate act of care. Through this, I learned the profound truth that love, once given, is eternal. It transforms, it guides, it shapes, and it endures. Though her voice is silent, her lessons echo. Though her hands no longer reach for mine, her touch lingers in every gesture of care I offer. And though she has left the physical world, she has become a part of the rhythm of my life, a steady heartbeat of memory, love, and enduring presence. In carrying her forward, I not only honored her memory, embraced life with a depth and tenderness that I might never have known otherwise. Her legacy became my living inheritance, and in that inheritance, I discovered the courage to love again, fully, to live deliberately, and to cherish every moment with those I hold dear. The days after her passing were quiet, almost painfully still. The house felt emptier, yet somehow fuller, filled with memories that clung to every corner. I would sit by the window, watching the sunlight spill across the garden she had loved so dearly, and I could almost feel her presence there, soft and steady, like a gentle breeze brushing against my cheek. I found myself speaking to her often, even if no words were returned. "Mom, I remembered what you told me today," I would say quietly, or, "I tried that recipe you loved." You would have laughed at how much I spilled. These moments, these conversations, kept her alive in my heart. They reminded me that goodbye does not erase love, it transforms it, makes it into a quiet strength that carries us forward. Life, I realized, is a series of hellos and goodbyes. And sometimes, the hardest goodbyes teach us the most about living. I learned to cherish every moment, to embrace every smile, every touch, every whispered "I love you," because these are the treasures that endure long after people leave our sight. I also came to understand that grief is not a linear journey. It ebbs and flows like the tide, sometimes gentle, sometimes crashing, but always moving. And in those moments of stillness, when the ache feels heaviest, there is also an invitation to remember, to reflect on the love, the lessons, the laughter, and the care that shaped a lifetime. I began to live more intentionally, carrying her wisdom with me. I reached out to friends I had lost touch with, mended relationships I had neglected, and sought to show kindness to those who needed it most. In every small act of love, I felt her presence, guiding me, reminding me that love is never wasted, never lost. It only finds new ways to flow. Sometimes, when the wind rustles through the trees or a bird sings a familiar tune outside the window, I close my eyes and imagine her smile, her laughter, the warmth of her embrace. I remember the countless ways she shaped my life, the quiet sacrifices she made, the strength she shared without ever asking for acknowledgement. These memories have become treasures I hold close. A quiet reminder that love transcends time, distance, and even death itself. Saying goodbye to her forever was the hardest thing I have ever done. But in doing so, I discovered a profound truth. The love we share does not end with the final breath. It lives in our hearts, in the choices we make, in the kindness we extend to others, and in the legacy of care and compassion we carry forward. And now, as I sit quietly in her favorite chair, the sun casting golden light across the room, I feel a gentle peace. The ache of loss is still there, yes, but it is softened by gratitude, by the richness of the life we shared, and by the certainty that her love remains with me, always. I have learned that goodbyes are not the end of a story, they are the beginning of a new chapter, one where love is remembered, celebrated, and carried forward in every moment we live, every hand we hold, every word we speak. And in this knowledge, I find comfort, hope, and the quiet joy of a heart forever connected to the one who gave me life, love, and the courage to live fully.